was pretty significant. One of the next big events was the David Grusch story that came out, which Ralph Blumenthal and I broke in June of 2023. And again, I don't know how many, probably some of you are familiar with this, but David Grusch was a high-level intelligence official who came out, who had been part of the UAP task force representing the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and the National Reconnaissance Office where he worked. He was their representative to the task force, very highly credentialed, had access to all kinds of special access programs and high clearances, very well respected within the intelligence community. It was a decorated combat officer from Afghanistan. It just had a tremendous resume. And he spent years at the task force looking into the question of crashed, retrieved vehicles. And he came to the conclusion after interviewing dozens and dozens of people, again, high-level intelligence officials and military people who trusted him, and also looking at documentation and looking at whatever he could get his hands on, that he came to the conclusion that we have programs within the United States that possess crashed vehicles of unknown origin. Very clearly, these are not made by humans. And he came out with this in the story that Ralph and I wrote. He had also given sworn testimony to the Inspector General of the intelligence community, and other people had also come in and spoken to them on his behalf, and they ruled his complaint credible and urgent. He had suffered a lot of retaliation and harassment as a result of coming forward, and that's what that was about. But it was also a stamp on his veracity and credibility, and he spent 11 hours speaking to congressional staffers, basically providing information to Congress at a classified level, all the details that all of us want but we can't have because they're classified. He told the members of Congress where these things were, what the program names were, who the people involved were, what the, all the details that we, again, don't have because they're classified. But the members of Congress received this information from him, which is very significant. So that was a big deal. Following his coming out, this legislation called the Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena Disclosure Act was put out by Chuck Schumer and Senator Rounds, this wonderful piece of legislation that talked about non-human intelligence many, many times, and talked about crash retrievals and was basically mapping out a path forward towards the gradual disclosure over a period of years so that the people in the country could be informed in a very methodical way, in a very high-level way, about the fact that we are not alone, basically. And it talked about the legacy programs, which is the name given to the programs that have existed for decades, which possess these craft. I mean, it was basically, I encourage anyone interested in this to read that document. It's just phenomenal to read the language of a document like this that is part of legislation. It has not passed, but they're still working on it. And it's the third year go-around is underway right now. So, and there's other legislation that's also pending, but this one was really, really interesting. And then in July of 23, we had the first significant congressional hearing in which David Grusch, the person we wrote about, Ralph and I wrote about, had written about a month ago, was sitting before Congress under oath talking about crash retrieved objects. And on either side of him were the two pilots that Ralph and Helene and myself had brought forward in the New York Times. And Ralph and I had also brought forward David Grusch. It was very interesting and satisfying to see these three gentlemen sitting there under oath speaking to Congress. That's Ryan Graves on the right side of Dave Grusch and Dave Fravor on the other side. And it was an incredibly electric event. I mean, there were lines of people. People came from all over the country, lined up for blocks and blocks and blocks outside. They came at 9 o'clock the night before and stood in line all night to get into this hearing because there was only space for 20 or 30 people. And most of them didn't get in, but it was just like this huge event that Congress was willing to have these people there, and that they asked really good questions and a lot of information came forward. Another event that happened after that, August of 24, Ralph and I wrote a story for the New York Times about Lou Elizono's book Imminent, which was on the New York Times bestseller list for 19 weeks after it came out. It's all about his time in the program, the ATIP program, and what he had done since then, and it's a wonderful book. And in that book, he basically confirmed what David Grusch was saying, and he's in a position to know. He confirmed that there are craft in our possession that are not made by humans, and he said it right out there. And he said, here's a quote, "Humanity is in fact not the only intelligent life in the universe, and it's not the alpha species." So that's a big deal. That's a lot to try to wrap your mind around. But again, these things are happening fast, right? And then we have another hearing in November of 24. This is the third hearing, and Lou Elizono himself was called as a witness there, and with some other important people. And again, he confirmed what David Grusch was saying and spoke to members of Congress under oath about the reality of the crash retrieval program. Others have come forward as well to do the same. Some of them behind the scenes, some of them publicly. These two gentlemen were sort of the most public people doing it, but there were a lot of others as well. So, you know, I'm at the point where I assume what they're saying is the truth, given the fact of who these people are and the level of access to information that they have. What Lou said to Congress under oath in his opening statement there, he said, UAP are real, advanced technologies not made by our government or any other government, are monitoring sensitive military installations around the globe. Furthermore, the U.S. is in possession of UAP technologies, as are some of our adversaries. These are technologies not made by humans. This is just a little funny kind of thing. The day after, Arrow came out with this report where they made the statement that that Arrow has discovered no verifiable evidence of extraterrestrial beings, activity, or technology. None of the cases resolved by Arrow have pointed to advanced capabilities or breakthrough technologies. I mean, the part about extraterrestrial beings, fine, I accept that. But I know people who had given testimony to Arrow at this date, and they had given testimony and information about advanced breakthrough technologies that had been observed. So Arrow was really kind of playing the role of the, kind of trying to shut everything down that was happening, and people basically didn't trust them. I guess this was the third hearing. The other one was the second one. This one just happened in last September. Another congressional hearing. And one of the more interesting, George Knapp, the journalist, was great in this. One of the more interesting witnesses was a young man named Dylan Borland, who's the one with the blue necktie. He again talked about his knowledge of the legacy programs that possess these crashed objects. And he was an Air Force official, geospatial intelligence expert who had access to that information. So, the whole dialogue is sort of gone now to the question. It's not so much about are they Russian or Chinese. The question really is, do we have these crash retrieved objects, and do we have these programs that have been around for decades that possess them, which so many people have come forward and described that we do. And there are many members of Congress who believe that we do, given what they've been told. So I'm just going to end with this recent story that Ralph Blumenthal and I wrote just a couple of weeks ago. A new movie came out called The Age of Disclosure. How many people in the room have seen Age of Disclosure? Okay, well, I'm going to show you the not many, so I'll show you this little trailer, and then we can do questions. But so Ralph and I, there was a private congressional screening of this movie. It's a very, very exceptional movie that took place in Washington on, I think it was the 17th of November. And I was invited, we were both invited to attend, and no other media were invited, and it was very small, and there were a group of congressmen there. And they were seeing this movie for the first time. Some of them were interviewed in the movie. I had notes about that. This was what anyway, this is just what the story looked like when it was in the New York Times. I just want to share a little bit about what it was like being there. This was the group of, there were 5 members of Congress in this screening watching this movie, which is incredibly powerful. 3 of them had been interviewed in it, 2 of them had not, and they hadn't really seen it before. And I had this interview with Congressman Burleson from, he's a Republican from Missouri, and this is a totally bipartisan issue, by the way. That's one of the things that's so wonderful about it. There were 2 Democrats and 3 Republicans at the screening. And Burleson is really involved, and he has hired David Grusch as a staffer in his office now. And he told me that he really thinks, and this is like 2 weeks ago, so this is kind of the current thinking of what's happening now. He told me that he thinks we've had enough hearings. They've done all these hearings, and they've all been good. But what he said was, and this is a quote, "We need some receipts." He calls them receipts. "We need some receipts, some physical or hard evidence. Behind the scenes, I'm trying to find the receipts. In private conversations, I've been given enough information to find them, but I just don't have access." And that's very revealing. Even though Congress has the information they need to find these things, they can't get access. So what does that mean? Burleson also stressed the need for new legislation, and he said for new whistleblower protection so more people can come forward. He's working on all of this, and he made the point that Trump could easily make an executive order that would release all these people from their oaths, their NDAs and oaths for secrecy, and it could all come out, and that could happen, and he's working on that. So these are the members that were there. This is kind of the core group of congressional representatives who are really passionate and working hard on this issue. So much goes on behind the scenes. And in the first picture, that's Brett Feddersen. He's a former White House Director of Aviation Security who was in the film, sitting with Jared Moskowitz from Florida, a representative. And then the guy laughing with the beard is Jay Stratton. He was the former head of the task force that I mentioned earlier and was part of ATIP. He has been working on this issue for 16 years. He probably knows just about more than anyone. And he is featured in the movie, and he was there. And, you know, I was privileged to be there in the room with him and these members of Congress having these conversations. And you can see Congressman Luna and Tim Burchett up on the Tim Burchett in the brown jacket. And then that's Burleson in the red tie. And Andre Carson was also there. He was the co-sponsor of the meeting. And all of these people are passionately working on trying to bring greater transparency to this. So I would just want to end by showing you the trailer for the movie Age of Disclosure, which just came out a couple of weeks ago. You can watch it on Amazon Prime. I'm not doing this as a promoter of the movie or anything. I just want you to see what it's like, and just so you'll get a sense of the power of this film. And then we'll end after that.